So for this pattern, I have two options. I have just a regular circular hem, or I have a split hem. So I'm going to show you how I work the circular hem first. So we're going to work an increase here and an increase on the back right here. And by doing that, we will end up with an odd number of stitches, and we will be able to connect both of these 1x1 ribs at the side, on the front, and on the back. All right, so let's work those increases. So here, these are 3.5mm needles. Let's start knitting directly onto my smaller needles. So here we go. I'm just going to do a knit one and a purl one, just working 1x1 rib to the marker. Here is my marker. And now I'm going to remove the marker. I'm just going to take it right off of the needle. And then I'm going to do what's called an M1P. So we are making one purlwise. So how I like to do this is I lift that strand of yarn between the two stitches, and I just place my left needle from the back to the front, bring my yarn to the front, and then I'm just going to purl into that front leg of that strand of yarn and then purl through, bring the yarn to the back, and that is my M1P. I've just made one stitch purlwise. Now I'm going to do a knit one, purl one, all the way to this marker here on the other side of the tank top. Okay, so we're just working 1x1 rib across this front section. I've reached the other stitch marker, so I'm going to take the stitch marker off. And now we're just going to work rib across this section of the tank top. So I'm just going to do a knit one and a purl one. I've reached my other stitch marker here, so I'm just going to remove it entirely. And now we're going to make an M1P. Lift up that strand of yarn from the back to the front, and then I'm going to bring my yarn up front, and we're just going to purl into that strand of yarn. So here we go, there we are, and we'll purl, great. And that is our M1P. We have just made one stitch purlwise. And now we're just going to work in knit one, purl one, basically 1x1 rib across to the end of the round. So we are working 1x1 rib across the entire back section until we get to this stitch marker. Here's my last stitch marker. So I'm going to take it off my needle. And now we've just got this little portion of 1x1 rib before we're at the end of the round. So let's just work that together. So here we go. Now all of my stitches have been moved over to my smaller 3.5mm needles. And now we are just going to be working 1x1 rib across the round. Okay, so you can put in a new stitch marker to mark the beginning and end of the round. And you're just going to repeat the next round, which is knit one, purl one. Okay, very simple across the entire round, just working 1x1 rib. Now, if you want to cast off in pattern, you can work 1x1 rib, the rib round, until your rib measures 2 inches, and then bind off in pattern. Or if you want to use the Italian tubular bind off, then you can knit until your rib measures 1.75 inches, and then work the Italian tubular bind off. So I'm going to switch over to my smaller 3.5mm needles, and I'm just going to knit directly onto the needles. So with our new smaller needles, we're just going to knit to the marker right here. So we're just going to work our 1x1 rib. I'm at the marker, so I'm going to take the marker off, and I'm going to do what's called an M1P. So an M1P is a make one purlwise. So we're going to grab that strand of yarn between these two stitches, just pick that right up, and then I'm going to use my left needle to go from the back to the front, just like this. And I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, purl into that yarn I've just picked up, and pull it off the needle. And that is my M1P. I've made one stitch that is now a purl stitch. Great. So now we're going to knit one, purl one. And now we're actually into the stockinette portion, the front part of our tank top, right? So I'm going to repeat knit one, purl one, basically working 1x1 rib all the way across the front of our tank top to the next stitch marker. So now I've reached my second marker, and that's my purl stitch. we're going to leave this stitch marker in place, okay? We're going to need this for our next round. And then we're going to work as established to the second marker. So we're going to do 1 by 1 rib over to this marker, and we're just keeping the rib on the side as it's been worked. And we are at the last stitch here before our marker. So I'm just going to take my marker off and set it to the side. And now we're going to do another M1P. So we're going to make one purlwise needle, swing it to the back, pick up that strand of yarn, and then bring the yarn up front to purl into that front strand of yarn. There we go. That's our M1P. And now we're just going to do a knit one and a purl one, essentially working 1 by 1 rib across the back of the tank top until we get to, you guessed it, the last stitch marker right here on the other side. All right, so again, we're going to be working 1 by 1 rib across the back of the tank top. All right, so here's my last stitch before the marker, and it is a purl stitch, which is what all sizes should have, a purl stitch right before this marker. All right, so now we are going to remove this marker. Our instructions say place marker for new beginning of the round. So my beginning of the round, my previous beginning of the round was actually right here, but we're actually going to leave these remaining stitches and just kind of push them to the next round. Don't worry about these stitches. For my size, I should have 10 stitches left. For your size, you may have 10, 12, 14, 16, or 18 stitches left before the end of the round. So here is my old beginning of round marker. I'm just going to take it off of my circular needle. Here we go. And just plop it onto my new smaller needles like this. This is now the beginning of the round. Okay, so now we are actually done this setup round, and we can move on to the decrease round. For the decrease round, the next round, we're just going to work these remaining stitches and then switch on over to the smaller needles. So at the end of the setup round, this should be your stitch count. So go ahead and count up all the stitches around your needle to make sure that you have the correct number of stitches for your size. So let's talk about stitch markers too. So at the end of the setup round, you should have a beginning of your round marker, and you should also have one stitch marker at the other side. Okay, and the rest of the stitch markers can go. The one that was on this side, the one that was on this side, those are gone. You just have the beginning of the round marker and one marker on the side of the work. If you accidentally remove that stitch marker, don't worry. Find the purl column, find the knit stitch to the right of it, and then place your stitch marker there. And that's where the stitch marker should go. For my size, I'm going to work 6 stitches in rib. You may work 6, 8, or 10 stitches depending on your size. All right, so I've worked 6 stitches in rib, 2, 4, 6, perfect. Now we're going to do what's called an SK2P. So an SK2P is a decrease. So we're going to use our right needle to slip into the next stitch as if to knit. Then we're going to slip that stitch right off. Then we're going to knit the next 2 stitches together. Here we go, knit them together. So I'm sticking my needle into those 2 stitches, wrapping my yarn around and pulling a stitch through. I'll give that a little tug. Then I'm going to slide my left needle underneath that stitch that I just slipped right here and drag it over this stitch where I just knit 2 stitches together. So I'm going to drag it over, and that is my SK2P. All right. So I can do that again for you. Let me just unravel everything. All right, let's work that SK2P again. I'm going to slip my right needle into the next stitch as if to knit, and then drop it off the needle. That's my slipped stitch. And then I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together. Stick my needle in, wrap the yarn around, pull a stitch through. Now I'm going to drag that stitch that I slipped, this one right here, over this one where I knit 2 stitches together. So I'm going to bring my left needle under that slipped stitch and then just drag it over the next stitch, which was the one where I knit 2 stitches together. And I'll just give my yarn a little tug. And now when you look at your knitting, you can see that the stitch column just sort of absorbs into the next knit stitch column. 3 stitches have been turned into 1, 2 stitches have been decreased. Okay, so let's move on. Next it says we're going to knit 2 together. Now for my size, I only have one stitch on this needle, so I'm just going to move it over to my smaller needle, just consolidate everything so I don't have to knit stitches in between two needles. So I'm going to grab that stitch, place it onto the smaller needles. Great. Okay, so where were we? We are going to do a knit two together. So here we go. I'm going to knit two stitches together. Great. And then I'm going to do a purl one, knit one. Bring my yarn up front, purl one and knit one. And then I'm going to repeat that purl one, knit one, essentially following the rib that is already established to one stitch before the marker. So that would be just to the marker over here. All right, so let's work one by one rib across these front stitches. All right, so I'm one stitch before my next marker and I'm going to purl that. There we go. Great. So I'm going to slip the marker and now I'm going to work 6 stitches in rib. If you are knitting another size, you may knit 8 or 10 stitches in rib. I'm going to knit 6, 2, 4, and 6. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing that we just did, an SK2P. I'm going to bring my needle into that next stitch and slip it as if to knit. There we go. And then I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together, just like that. And then I'm going to slip the slipped stitch, this one right here, over this stitch where I knit 2 stitches together. So I'm going to bring my left needle underneath that slipped stitch and then just drag it over the next stitch and give it all a little tug. Next, I'm going to knit 2 together. Here we go. Whoops. Just knitting these next 2 stitches together. Perfect. And then I'm going to do a purl one, knit one, all the way to the end of the round, right here. Our pattern says to the last stitch, and then we're going to purl that last stitch. All right, here's the last stitch on my decrease round. I'm going to bring my yarn up front and purl that purl stitch. And now we are at the end of the round. Let me move my stitch marker over. Beautiful. First, we're going to work either 6, 8, or 10 stitches in rib, depending on your size. I'm going to be working 6 stitches in rib. So we worked 6 stitches in rib. You may work 8 or 10 depending on your size. Next, you're going to slip the next stitch onto a cable needle and hold in front. Now you can use a cable needle. You can also use a bobby pin, which is what I've got here. You can even use a stitch marker or like a safety pin just to hold that stitch. So I'm just going to take that next stitch and place it onto my bobby pin. Now that one stitch is on my bobby pin, now I'm going to hold that bobby pin down. I'm holding it in front of the knitting. And now I'm going to knit one from the next left needle. Here we go, knit one. And then I'm going to knit the stitch that is on my bobby pin. I'm going to place it back onto the left needle. There we go. And then I'm going to knit that stitch. Great, and that is all there is to the cable cross. Let's continue on. We're going to do a purl one. Here we go, purl one and a knit one. And we're going to repeat that purl one, knit one across the front of the tank top. So we're at 1 stitch before the marker and I'm going to purl that. Great. We're going to remove the marker entirely, just take it right off. And then I'm going to work 6 stitches. You may work 8 or 10 depending on your size in rib. Grab my bobby pin again, and I'm going to slip the next stitch onto my bobby pin. Just grab that, and now it's on my bobby pin, and I'm going to leave it up in the front. Then I'm going to knit the next stitch on my left needle, just knit that. And now here's where things get a little different. I'm going to grab my stitch marker and place it back onto my right needle. And then I'm going to put the stitch on my bobby pin back onto my left needle. And I'm going to knit that stitch that I placed onto my left needle. There we go. So now I've created a cable cross in my ribbing. Beautiful. And this stitch marker is to separate the front piece from the back piece. Now we're just going to work purl one, knit one. Basically 1 by 1 rib all the way to the end of the round. Our last stitch is going to be a purl one. So we are going to actually remove this beginning of the round marker, and then we're going to work either 6, 8, or 10 stitches in the rib. 6. Perfect. All right, then we're going to purl 1. So I'm going to purl this stitch, purl it. Great. Don't forget that purl. Then we're going to place marker. Now you don't have to use the beginning of the round marker like this because we're not really working in the round anymore. So I'm not going to use that one. I'm just going to bring out just a regular marker, and then I'm going to turn. And that actually just means turning your work around so that now we are working on the wrong side of the tank top, okay? Because now we're no longer working in the round. We've split our hem in half, so we're gonna be working back and forth, meaning we're gonna work one side on the right side and then one side on the wrong side. We've done our turn. Now we're on row 2, okay, which is the wrong side. So I'm gonna bring my yarn to the back and slip one knitwise with the yarn in the back. Now that's gonna sound very familiar to you because it's exactly what we did when we were working our armholes for that nice edge. And we're doing the same thing when we work our split hem. We're going to slip one knitwise, and then we are going to work in rib to 1 stitch before the marker. So we're going to be working on the wrong side all the way to the back to the other end of the tank top. All right, so I've got 1 stitch left before my marker, so I'm going to purl that stitch. And great, now we are going to turn our work again. So just turn over so that we are on the right side of our tank top. So row 3, we are on the right side of our knitting, and you're going to slip one knitwise with the yarn in back. So very similar to slipping our edge stitches. And then you're just going to work in rib to 1 stitch before your next stitch marker. I'm 1 stitch before the marker, so I'm always going to purl that stitch. We are wanting to create that selvage edge that we had at the armhole on the split hem. So that's why our last stitch always gets purled. The first stitch always gets slipped knitwise with the yarn in back. All right, so we're going to turn our work over. We're back on the wrong side, okay? And we're gonna repeat row 3. If you wanna bind off in pattern, then knit until your hem measures 2 inches and then bind off. So I'm gonna link a video up top on how to bind off in pattern and also on how to bind off with the Italian tubular bind off. All right, so now let's turn our work over. And this is the front side of our tank top, and we still need to work the hem on the front. Okay, so I'm going to grab my yarn and we're just going to rejoin it to the tank top. And then we're going to work the front hem by just repeating row 3. So the front hem, we're going to start with row 3, which is a slip one knitwise with the yarn in back. So I'm just going to slip that knitwise. We're not joining the yarn yet. And now with our second stitch, I'm going to bring my yarn up here. I'm holding it in the back of my knitting. And then I'm going to bring the yarn up front, just swing it up and purl that first stitch. There we go. And then I'm just going to work knit 1, purl 1, basically 1 by 1 rib across the front hem. Okay, and when I get to the last stitch, I'm going to purl. Then once I do that, I'm going to turn my work around to the wrong side and do the exact same thing all over again. So now my front hem is complete and it looks fabulous. Our tank top is really coming together. If you're worried about the hem being a little bit tapered in, we can always fix that when we block our tank top and just stretch everything out to the dimensions that we want. Now we're ready to work the neckline of our tank top. Right now it's unfinished, so we're going to use our smaller circular needles to basically pick up stitches around the neckline and knit them in 1 by 1 rib. This begs the question, how many stitches are we going to pick up along the neckline? And the answer is, it depends. The number is affected by if you're binding off an Italian tubular bind off or if you're just binding off in pattern. If you're binding off an Italian tubular bind off, I recommend picking up stitches at a 1-to-1 rate. What that means is that for every stitch and every row along the neckline, you're going to pick up 1 stitch. So that is a 1-to-1 pickup rate. If you're going to be binding off in pattern, I recommend a 1-to-1 pickup rate at the back and the front, these horizontal sections, and at the sides, picking up at a rate of 3 to 4, which means that for every 4 stitches or rows along this curved neckline, you're going to be picking up 3 stitches. Basically, pick up 3 stitches and skip 1 stitch. And I want to just show you what these different pickup rates look like. So I've bound off an Italian tubular bind off here, and I've done a pickup rate of 1 to 1. I find that with Italian tubular bind off, because the bind off is a lot tighter because of those 2 rounds of double stockinette stitch, a 1 to 1 pickup rate actually works really well. So that's why I recommend just a 1 to 1 pickup rate around the entire neckline. This is a second swatch that I've knit up where I use a 3 to 4 pickup rate, meaning that for every 4 rows or stitches, I'm only picking up 3 stitches. The 3 to 4 pickup rate, it sort of squishes in a little bit more. It's a little bit tighter. So that is my recommendation. If you're binding off with Italian tubular bind off, pick up at a 1 to 1 rate. If you're binding off in pattern, pick up 1 to 1 on the back and the front and 3 to 4 around the sides. So let's say I'm binding off in pattern. What I would do is take out stitch markers and mark off the neckline where we're going to be picking up 3 to 4 and the sections where we're going to be picking up 1 to 1. All right, now I'm going to turn my tank top around. We're going to start picking up right here, all the way down, all the way up here, and then across the back, and we will end where we started, at which point we will join in the round. So I'm going to grab my yarn and we're going to start picking up some stitches at the neckline starting here. I'm just going to stick my needle right into a stitch right at the top there, and I'm going to grab my yarn and I'm going to just wrap it around my needle and then pull a stitch out. And that is 1 stitch that I've picked up. You can sort of see these little bars, right? So I'm going to stick my needle into the next bar down and wrap my yarn around the needle and pull out a second stitch. So I'm going to stick my needle into the next one down and pull out a third stitch, 3. So now I've got 3 stitches that I picked up. And along this curved edge, we're picking up at a rate of 3 to 4, which means that for every 3 stitches we pick up, we're going to skip the 4th one. So I'm going to look for the next stitch down, and that's right here, but I'm not going to pick up into it. I'm going to skip it. So we're going to skip that, and we're going to go to the next one right here and start picking up again. 1, 2, and here's my third one, 3, and then we're going to skip the 4th one. So I'm going to skip this, and instead I'm going to go into the next one, and we're going to start all over again. 1, 2, 3, whoops, 3, and we're going to skip this next one right here, skip this one and go into the next one. 1, 2, 3, and we'll skip the next one. Okay, so I'm going to continue all the way down until I reach my marker. Now I'm at my stitch marker. I'm going to skip to a 1 to 1 pickup rate for this section right here. So I'm going to just take off my stitch marker, and now I'm going to work a 1 to 1 pickup rate. For every stitch there is, I'm going to go into it. So here I'm going to go into the next knit stitch, and you can just sort of look for the V shape. So for every V shape there is, we're going to go into it. And then where is the next one? Here's the next one. There we go. And then run right here. So we're not skipping any stitches. That's what a 1 to 1 pickup rate means. We're going to go into every stitch. Okay, so now we are ready to work the curved portion of our neckline. So when we're working this curve, we are using a 3 to 4 pickup rate, the exact same as what we did on the other side. And we're going to go straight into this curved portion. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to skip this next stitch and we're going to jump to the next one. 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to skip this one and go into the next one. 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to continue with this 3 into 4 pickup rate till we hit the next stitch marker. We've reached the back. This is where we cast on stitches, and now we're going to switch to a 1 to 1 pickup rate. Same as with the front, we're going to go into every stitch. So look for the V shape. Here it is, and then I'm going to go into it from the top. So go ahead and pick up 1-to-1 stitch across the back neckline. Before I finish picking up my stitches, I actually want to count up how many stitches I've picked up along the neckline. We're going to be knitting 1 by 1 rib, which needs an even number of stitches. So go ahead, count up the number of stitches to make sure that you're on track to have an even number of stitches. I've counted up 135 stitches. I need to make sure that I end up with an even number. So 135, here's 136, 138. Great. Now I've picked up an even number of stitches. So now I'm ready to knit 1 by 1 rib. So I'm going to start at this top left edge, and I'm going to stick my needle into this first stitch, and I'm going to grab my working yarn, loop it around the needle, and pull out a stitch. There we go. That's one stitch that I picked up. Then I'm going to go down and just stick my needle in again to the next knit stitch, wrap my needle around, and pull out a second stitch. And I'm going to just continue down across the neckline. Every stitch gets picked up. So along the neckline here, you'll see little V shapes, and those represent a row that we've knit. So I'm going to just stick my needle into the V shape and drag out a stitch. And I'm going to go into the next one down here, wrap my yarn around and pull out a stitch. And we're going to go into the next one here, wrap my yarn around, pull out a stitch. Okay, so just kind of uncurl your edge a bit, and then you'll really be able to see those little V shapes running down the edge of the knitting. For every stitch and row, we are picking up 1 stitch. That is a 1-to-1 pickup rate. So I've picked up a bunch of stitches around my neckline using a 1-to-1 pickup rate. Count up the number of stitches that you have. You need an even number of stitches. So for me, I've counted up 164 stitches. 165, and I'll pick up 1 more stitch. 166. Great. So now I know that I've got an even number of stitches. With all my stitches picked up, now I can join in the round and knit 1 by 1 rib. Get out a stitch marker and just place it onto my right needle. And now we're ready to work round 1. So round 1 is really simple. It's basically just 1 by 1 rib. We're going to knit 1 and purl 1 and just repeat that, right? We're going to go knit 1 and purl 1. Now I have a little habit when I do any kind of rib to give a little tug after each stitch, really similar to what we were doing with the edge stitches. And that's maybe why my rib tends to be a little bit tight. You're just going to be working 1 by 1 rib around the entire neckline so you get back to the beginning of the round. And my last stitch is going to be a purl stitch. Great. So I'll move my stitch marker over. And now we're just going to repeat round 1. So if you are binding off in pattern, you're going to repeat round 1 3 more times. If you are working the Italian tubular bind off, then you would repeat round 1 2 more times before working the bind off. So I'm not going to walk you through the rest of the neckline. I've linked the instructional videos on binding off in pattern and Italian tubular bind off in the description. Now I've finished the rib around my neckline. I've bound off with Italian tubular bind off, and I think the rib looks absolutely beautiful. So now we are going to weave in the ends of our tank top. So let's first look at the split hem right here. So you'll have a strand of yarn, and typically I'll just weave that onto my tapestry needle. And then I'm just going to, let's see, go through to the other knit column here. And then I like to weave into the right leg of each knit stitch, just all the way up here. Hide that little strand of yarn. So I'm just going to swing my tapestry needle around, grab the right leg of each knit stitch going up, and then I'm just going to pull the yarn through. The strand of yarn is woven into the right legs of all of these little knit stitches. I can turn it over to the right side and that looks really nice. Snip off that strand of yarn and that's one strand taken care of. So another area is the underarm. So this is an area that I want to reinforce because it does get quite a lot of wear and tear. So with this little strand of yarn, I just like to go into the stitches, wrap it around these edge stitches to just sort of reinforce them. I'll just go under the stitch and then like over the stitch. That feels like a nice reinforced edge. I'll just turn it inside out. Once again, just weave in this strand of yarn into the knit column. Pull the yarn through, snip that off. And when I look at the armhole, it looks really nice and neat. Once you've woven in ends, you're ready to block the tank to the right dimensions. Dunk your tank top in a bowl of room temperature water and let it soak for around 10 to 15 minutes. Then squeeze out as much water as you can. I like rolling up my tank in a towel to help to get that last bit of moisture out. Then lay the tank on a towel and stretch it out to the finished measurements listed in the pattern schematic. Because the tank is wet, it's a lot more malleable, so you can stretch it out to the dimensions that you want and pin it in place. When it dries, it will stay in those dimensions. Once the tank is dried, try it on and wear it out with pride. You did it!